Welcome to Fox Hill's Black Report, your daily source for Black news, views, and opinions. Happy Monday. Today is August 15th, and I'm Amy Brown.
And I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, Manhattan's district attorney is launching an application process for people seeking a review of their convictions. The new post-conviction justice unit is focused on resolving wrongful convictions. Meanwhile, a Seattle woman was caught on video calling police on camera, calling a black man standing in the yard of a rental home a name. And we're going to tell you what happened with that. Then NBC Dateline is focusing on the murder of Anton Black. The 1-hour special will look at how police dealt with his mental health breakdown.
Plus, Wendy Williams is making her comeback. We'll tell you what's up with the veteran talk show host. And Mace is back. The bad boy veteran is taking his talents to the west side and joining Death Row Records. We have all that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. We start today with news out of New York, where the Manhattan District Attorney is launching an application process for people seeking a review of their convictions. The new post-conviction justice unit is focused on resolving wrongful convictions. According to the Innocence Project, New York has the third highest number of wrongful convictions in the country. Now, part of the reason is that legislation makes it difficult for people who plead guilty to challenge their convictions. The other reason is rooted in the ways officers and detectives investigate crimes and falsely identify their suspects. Following the exoneration of Stephen Lopez, the sixth teenager charged in the Central Park 5 case, the DA's office there, they made plans to free more people who have suffered the same fate. The new post-conviction justice unit is focused on resolving issues and undoing wrongful convictions. I think this is a really good thing to do. I hope that other states will follow suit. Over the past 3 decades, there have been dozens of people who have been convicted of crimes in New York County that have had their convictions overturned. We mentioned the Central Park 5, of course, and then the unknown 6th member, Stephen Lopez, who recently had his conviction overturned. And then there was another guy, Johnny Hickabee. I think we did his story here a couple of weeks ago. He was coerced into falsely confessing to the brutal stabbing of a tourist in the subway, on the subway platform, that he did not do. He spent 2 decades in prison before a judge overturned his sentence. And so, you know, there's this pattern, especially in the 90s, late 80s, where we're seeing a lot of these convictions now being overturned. There was an officer who was coercing a lot of these young black men at the time. And so right now what we're seeing is some of these convictions being overturned. And so I don't know how long this application process will go, what you'll have to do, but it's a start. And I think that those sitting behind jail who are wrongfully convicted, this gives them a little bit of hope.
Yeah. You know, really shout out to the Innocence Project, because they have been doing really great work in the community, especially for black people, especially for those who have been convicted before. And honestly, the first step to getting change is to get the numbers out there. So them putting out New York having the third highest number of wrongful convictions in the country is a talking point to kind of get those conversations started, to see some change.
Yeah, I agree. If you think about what's going on across the country, there's probably so many other cases like this. Matter of fact, we know they are, but how long does it take? When you talk about exonerated 5, or should we say 6, that took up to 13 years. People are losing life, losing time behind bars for something they did not do. We know about the young kids that may sign off on something saying they did something because they signed off in fear, or they were promised they would be able to go home to their parents, when all of a sudden they end up behind bars for years, sometimes decades. So this is an ongoing problem. And when you think about people of color, we make up 13% of this country, but you think about how many people are actually locked up, it's double that amount. So how do we make sure that those people that are not really, really guilty, how can they get back home sooner than later?
This will be a good case study to follow and see kind of what happens with this. And if it works, and how more counties and states and cities can develop something like this, because we know, as you just pointed out, Romeo, we may be only 13% of the population, but we make up majority of the prison systems.
We definitely do.
We absolutely do, and hopefully some resolve and change can come as a result of this. Police in New Mexico have identified the prime suspect in the killing of 4 Muslim men. Using tips from the public, police say that they tracked down the car used in one of the killings. At the same time, a SWAT team executed a search warrant on the suspect's home. The murders sparked fear in Muslim communities nationwide. The first murder was back in November, but the other 3 victims were all killed in the past 3 weeks. 51-year-old Mohammed Saeed is charged with 2 of the murders. He is the prime suspect in the other 2 slayings. Investigators said that evidence shows the suspect knew the victims to some extent, and interpersonal conflict may have sparked the shootings. All of the victims are from Pakistan or Afghanistan.
La Mesa, California is agreeing to pay $125,000 to settle a lawsuit filed by a black man who was assaulted by a cop in 2020. This is police body cam footage of the incident you're watching right now. Amari Johnson says former La Mesa police officer Matthew Dages approached him, accusing him of smoking at a trolley transit stop. Johnson says he wasn't, but the officer, as can be seen in the video, gets physical with Johnson. Johnson was arrested on suspicion of assaulting a police officer. The charges against him were dismissed. Johnson filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Dages, who was eventually fired. Johnson's arrest came 2 days after the death of George Floyd. The La Mesa area was the scene of the intense protests sparked by Floyd's death and Johnson's arrest.
And 2 Sudanese men are suing Alaska Airlines for kicking them off of a flight after another passenger complained about them speaking and texting in Arabic. Ababakar Dair and Mohammed El Amin say they were asked to leave a flight at Seattle-Tacoma Airport in 2020. The men say they were used as scapegoats in an unjustified display of security theater. They allege Alaska Airlines weaponize Islamophobia and racism. Alaska Airlines officials have not yet commented on the lawsuit.
A North Carolina sheriff's deputy is being ordered to pay a black man $50,000 for a strip search 4 years ago. A federal judge says Buncombe County Deputy Jeff May violated Marcus Hyatt's constitutional rights when the strip searched him at a highway gas station in Asheville, North Carolina in 2018. Hyatt is standing on the right. Now, the judge says that race was the motivating factor when May said he smelled crack cocaine on Hyatt. Last week, Judge Redinger ruled that the strip search was an unlawful search and seizure. The judge says the deputy also fabricated evidence in order to get a search warrant.
People in a seaside Italian town took to the streets this weekend to protest the death of a Nigerian man who was beaten to death for complimenting an Italian man's girlfriend. We're talking about Nigerian immigrants led a march through the streets of Makitara province, angered by the death of Alika Ogorchukwu. A second protest was led by black Italians from all over the country. They are demanding police consider the allies' death racially motivated. Italian police have charged Filippo Ferlazzo with Alika's death, but ruled out race as a reason for the killing. African immigrants have complained about violence by white Italians against the country's black community.
The family of a South Carolina man who died in jail in custody, they are filing a lawsuit against the jail and its officials. They say Layson Butler died from dehydration in the jail back in February. The lawsuit also alleges Butler had rat bites on his body. The Butler family says Layson was in a special housing unit. He was denied food, water, and medical care at the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. Now, Butler was being held in jail for a misdemeanor traffic violation. He, along with 3 other inmates, have died in the detention center this year. This story was extremely sad. This man was 27 years old. He was found in his jail cell nearly 2 weeks after being brought there, but on a traffic violation. So he was arrested for failure to stop, reckless driving, as well as driving on a suspended license. He had not gone to court. These were misdemeanors. And so he was inside of a jail cell. He was denied just the basics: water, food, care. His family said he had a heart condition, but that's not the official cause of death. The official cause of death is complications due to hydration. So there are other lawsuits in this jail from people alleging that they have been abused, especially people with disabilities. And they said that the hospital, the the jail itself, especially if you have disabilities or you have mental issues, they treat you really bad, and they don't give you your medicine and the things that you need. And so there's several lawsuits out there, and so his death has been ruled a homicide, but no one has been charged.
I mean, how much worse can it get? You are already in jail, and when you go to jail, you don't assume that you won't get the basics like water and the basics, because also you're already in jail here, and so you can't have high expectations of much. But when you go to jail, your family is at least expecting that you're going to have a meal to eat and to have water. You know, like we said, the basics. And so to know that even now having a disability that lessens his chance of getting what he deserved in jail just really is disheartening, and that it had to end this way. And I'm hoping that this family gets justice, because the mother said there's not a day that goes by, as most mothers do, that lose a family member, lose a son or a child, that she doesn't think about her son. And she asked for those who did not take good care of her son to think about what you did, because honestly, I feel like basic humane inside of you, that if you think about what you've done to somebody, that will make you feel some type of sympathy. It has to, right? Like make you feel bad for what you've done to a person.
Well, a couple of things bother me here. One, obviously we're talking about there's lawsuits against the facility, all right? But my thing is, why does something like this misdemeanor, why would he even end up here? So that's the problem we have. You think about during the pandemic, early on, they were saying like, look, late tags and things like that, they're a misdemeanor. They're not going to put people behind bars. Here's someone that's been put behind bars. He's denied food. You're saying he may have a heart condition. If he had medication, was he even getting that? So there's a lot of questions to the situation. The family wants answers. And at the end of the day, they probably end up cutting a check, but it's not bringing a child's life back. Because so many times I feel like they always just lean on, all right, well, here's a couple meal, whatever.
You know, what's really sad about this, too, is we always talk about traffic violations and how that leads to our death. This led to his death in a different kind of way, right? A simple traffic violation. And I'm just guessing here, Romeo, to your point, though, when he's sitting behind bars and he can't get out, maybe it's because of bail. You know, we know that a lot of times when we're put behind bars, we can't afford the bail to get out. So we're sitting there waiting for this court date that may or may not come, when God knows who or how long that's going to take. And so that coupled with him being in jail for a traffic violation, not having the money, and it resulting in this, I think that's kind of what led to this, what we're seeing. Bakari Sellers, the CNN contributor, who is also an attorney in South Carolina, is taking and leading this case. And so, you know, what is the value of a black man's life? There is none. You're right, there is none. But he said, he asked that question, and he said, we're about to find out, you know, because clearly this jail, some people, there's something that happened that went wrong, and they want to get to the bottom of it.
As they should. The family definitely deserves that.
Yeah.
As a severe drought in Nevada dries up Lake Mead, the water supply for millions of Americans out west, it is also revealing the water is also the final resting place for the murdered people. More human remains were discovered over the weekend. It's the fourth time since May that remains have been uncovered at the Colorado River Reservoir located behind the Hoover Dam. The Clark County Medical Examiner's Office will also try to determine when and how the person died. The discoveries have people thinking about the lake being a place where organized crime disposed bodies of victims of mob hits. The mafia once ruled Las Vegas before the multi-billion-dollar corporation took over the gaming and hotel industry. Lake Mead is only a minute drive from the city.
A white Wisconsin man accused of driving a car into a mostly African-American crowd in 2020 pled guilty to a felony, but his record could be erased over time. 28-year-old Brendan O'Neill drove his car in downtown Madison, injuring a black woman as part of his guilty plea to a hit-and-run charge. O'Neill will have his record erased if he completes a first offender program. O'Neill claims he accelerated through a crowd when people began reaching into his car trying to pull him from his truck. Police say one hit Carter, who wound up with a fractured hand and a concussion.
More than 300 Haitian migrants are in Miami after an overloaded sailboat was discovered in the Florida Keys last weekend. The U.S. Coast Guard and Border Control found the boat, which was grounded off the shore of a gated community on Saturday. 200 people were on the boat as 113 migrants waded into the shallow shore water. The people on the boat will most likely be sent back to Haiti. Now, Border Control officials say the Florida Keys is popular for smugglers bringing people into Haiti, from Haiti. lady.
And a viral video is hitting the internet showing a white Seattle woman calling police to report a black man who was standing outside a house he was renting.
If you guys have a lease, I'd just like to see the lease.
No, ma'am.
You have no business
For
in
real.
personal documents.
At all.
The video, which was shot last week, shows the woman confronting Dason Barnes, who is black, about why he is at the house. The video was posted by Barnes' partner on Reddit. Now, Barnes says the men moved to the neighborhood 3 weeks ago. King County Sheriff's deputies went to the house on a report of a possible burglary. When they got there, the woman suddenly says to the dispatcher the incident was a misunderstanding. The deputies eventually checked Barnes' identification and left. This, you know, the Karens are just Karening at this point, honestly. And I mean, there's Karens in everywhere, every city, every state, all around the nation. And I just wonder what would make a woman, anybody, right, think that they can even approach me as to where I live. If I live in a place, I would be mortified. But again, just shout out to the brave people, because a situation like this, I know I would be too scared to post about things like this happening to me. And I'm just, it's just appalling. This lady, and then to say that it was a misunderstanding, like, yeah, it was not a misunderstanding. I know that I live here. You shouldn't have been even in my business this much.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, first of all, who are you? Like, is this neighborhood watch? What are we doing? Like, are you a neighbor? So maybe in more detail, I'm assuming she had nothing to do with the home. If she did, then she would have known that it was their place, right? That they were moving into or lived in. So again, in the middle of broad daylight, you have a lady making a phone call to a police department that's taking away from something else that could be a big emergency to pull up for this situation, which shouldn't have been happening at all. I mean, another Karen incident. Like I said, I thought we went through these Karens and we were done. But like you said, they're picking back up. It's crazy.
Listen, I'm with you. Who are you? This lady said, I'd like to see your lease. Why do I have to show you my lease? Who are you? You are some random lady that pulled up on the curb to asking me about my house on my property, and you want to see my lease? No. Why?
I think it would even be different if it was in an apartment complex. Like, okay, you moved next door, but like at my house, how do you think I got the keys to come in here? Like, because I bought the keys to be here.
And the lady, so I guess at some point she said, I know who lives here. So the guy was visiting, or he lives with his boyfriend, and apparently I'm assuming the boyfriend is white and the guy must be black, right? So she said, yes, I'm assuming, just because I don't, we didn't see, but if a Karen is calling the police on a black guy, and the boyfriend had came out and said that they live together, she was like, I know who lives here and you don't live here. And so I guess the boyfriend said, no, he lives here with me. And so, it's just very nosy. It's just, the whole situation is none of your business. We shouldn't even be doing a story on this, because where two people live, where they live, how they live, that is none of our business.
Not at all.
You know?
Continues to happen.
Ugh.
All right, the 2018 murder of Anton Black was the focus of an all-new one-hour Dateline special entitled What Happened to Anton Black? The special took an important look at community policing and whether police should be responding to mental health calls. It investigated the circumstances surrounding 19-year-old Anton Black, who died in front of his home in Greensboro, Maryland, when police responded to a 911 call back in 2018. Black's case didn't get much national attention at the time, but his story was revived in the wake of George Floyd's murder in 2020. His family filed a federal lawsuit accusing the police of using excessive force. They were awarded $5 million as part of the deal. Several towns must enact police reform. We've been screaming, we've been talking about this for years now. I feel like every week we talk about a situation on this show. We talked about the numbers, the number 988. I want to make sure I remember that number.
Yes,
that they're trying to build and help, and maybe give you an option to call instead of calling the police when it's not really that kind of situation. 19 years old, whole life snatched away, family changed forever. And now I feel like they're getting to the point where, would you rather have the police locked up, or would you rather take the money? What if it gets to that point? Because technically, the money can't bring my son back, but I want the money and I want them locked up more importantly. But a friend of mine was having that conversation saying, well, if they get to that point where you want to take the money and have them behind bars, what are you going to do?
I would like both. I'm like you, Romeo, that I would like both. I don't want to have to choose the price of a life. I want justice, and I also want the money at the same time for the time spent that I had to deal with this situation. So I want both.
And your life's changed forever.
And I want justice for the person that they hurt in my family. This case, I had never heard of Anton Black, and it came to light after George Floyd, because he died in a similar manner. They said that he was pinned down for 6 minutes by police on his mother's front porch. So can you imagine, his mother was watching this happen? They said that you know, he went unconscious, he died at the hospital, but apparently he was roughhousing with his 12-year-old neighbor when another neighbor called the police, and that's how police were called to the scene. They said what the neighbor didn't know is that the 12-year-old boy that he was roughhousing with, they were friends. And so for an outsider looking in, maybe it looked like because he was 19 and this was 12, I think he was he 19? Yes, he was 19.
Yeah.
And the little boy was 12, that it kind of looked like maybe he was hurting him. But they said that they do that all the time. And so here we are once again. I'm glad that we're able to shine a light on this and that we know about this and that there are police reforms that are coming along with the settlement. So to your point, Romeo, about what would you take, I guess the family said, okay, well, if the office, I don't know if the officer's going to go to jail, I don't know if anyone's been charged, but they stipulated that they wanted police reform. So in their settlement, they also the officers have to go through de-escalation training, implicit bias lessons, transparency with hiring. They want that implemented in this Maryland town and a few other Maryland counties now. And so there are things, I mean, and I think that's a good idea. I never thought about that. So when you get your settlement, you can, you know, negotiate so that someone else's family doesn't have to go through this, if you can, you know.
It's a point that I have to make, Mimi, because you are hitting some wonderful points here. When we watched George Floyd's death over and over and over, I remember just every single day was very gruesome. That's what I learned what the prone position was, where the knee is on the back. I had never heard of the prone position before. And I just, you know, everything happens for a reason. And we will always remember George Floyd's death. And that will go down in history as one of the most awful moments in our history to have to watch. However, it was for this family, I'm sure when this happened to them, they had no idea what this was, how to report about it, nothing, right? They're like, this has happened to my son. We don't know what just happened, right? So imagine seeing George Floyd's death and they finally can put a name to what they saw, right? And can put and say, wow, this is what happened to my family. Exactly. And so now they have, and I hope I'm making sense with this. Now they have something to hang. I'm trying to make sure I say it right so that it doesn't sound insensitive to George Floyd's death. But they have something to be able to grab onto, to be able to say, okay, this also happened to me, and how can we go about handling this justice for my family as well? So
I definitely understand what you're saying, and it's very sad overall that this had to happen. But if you pull back some of the layers, what it's doing is it's exposing other people who may not have known what to call it, who may not have had the exposure to get their story out now, that they can say, well, this happened to me in this very small town of Maryland, and this happened to my son, very similar to what happened to George Floyd. So in that sadness, you know, there's still more sadness, but there's also that layer where you can pull out and say, now these families are getting some justice.
Yeah, my mom said since George Floyd, things have frustrated us and educated us.
Yes,
unfortunately.
absolutely.